Do you remember using that term in a different
I
context?
I do, yeah. Because I used to have this gatekeeper theory, right? I used to
I
call it my
think this is where
gatekeeper
it came
theory.
from.
Right.
Yeah.
So the gatekeeper theory is just quite simply this, is that we inhabit the world that we know, like 100%. Whatever we grow up with is normal. Okay.
Hmm.
So if you grow up in complete poverty or something like that, you're in a working class, poverty, whatever, that's what you know. That is reality.
Yeah.
And the other worlds that exist out there, you might know about them. You may have read about them. You may have watched movies about them, but they're not real. They're fictions, right? And you can't operate
For
in
you.
those worlds. Yeah,
Right.
for you, they're fictions.
Right.
So, like, it doesn't matter what you do. You can't imagine what it's like to be in that world. You don't have the presuppositions that help you make sense of that world. So it's a fiction. So, like, let's say I come from a working class background and my parents are market traders or something like that.
Mm.
Like somebody who works, say, as a trader in the city of London or in New York or something, in Wall Street. If I read about that, that's a fantasy. It doesn't mean anything to me,
Mm.
right? It's an unreal thing.
Yeah, it's just as real as a fairy tale you might read in a book. It's like a
Exactly.
different world.
I may
Yeah.
as well be reading Lord of the Rings, right? I can go and
Right.
I can
Right.
appreciate it, I can
Right.
enjoy it, but that's not real. So my theory around gatekeepers, and this came from reflecting on my own life, is that it's only when you meet somebody that actually shows you this other world, right?
Hmm.
They take you through the portal to this other world, and you go, oh, look at
Right.
that! Like people actually do this and live this way and do. And then at
Yeah.
that point, my own experiences, I would never really get that. Oh, I could do this. I could be
Right.
this. I could have this. It was only when somebody took me through the portal. So I would think back and think about, um, the different kind of portals I'd gone through and who were the gatekeepers for me.
Yeah.
So that's all it really was.
Yeah.
It's just
That's
this.
that's what I remembered as well. And I
Yeah.
remember us talking about it when, um, when I had discovered this kind of high fee life coaching world,
Right.
with Rich Litvin and Steve Chandler, with their book when they were writing the book, The Prosperous Coach, and you and I went to this event.
Hmm.
And it was like, we knew what coaching was. We were helping people and getting paid for it, but it was way different, a couple £100 an hour per session. And these guys were charging 30, 40, $50,000 paid up front.
Yeah.
And that was like Lord of the Rings. It was like, what is this? And then I remember talking about what we went time and spent time in that world. And we realized, oh, it's just being in this world, hanging out in this world, and like, and learning how to emulate almost this language system that
Yeah.
this being lives in.
Yeah. Yeah. Robert Keegan talks about that. He talks about different language cultures. I think
Yeah.
they're kind of like concept cultures or idea cultures, whatever, but like it's just culture, really.
Yeah.
You hang out in one culture and you hang out in the conceptual system of that culture, and then that shapes what you see and what you're able to perceive. And you go into a different culture and you hang out in the perceptual system of that culture. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa, everything's really different here. I remember that for that event particularly.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'd come from this kind of NLP hypnosis culture, which had a
Mm.
particular way of seeing the world. And it's kind of aligned with that stuff that Rich and Steve were um,
It's
orchestrating.
transformation, right? It's
Yeah,
transformation. So it's aligned in that way.
right. But the
Yeah.
whole conceptual system, the underlying conceptual system was quite different.
Yeah.
That's why it was really good for me. I got a lot of value
Mm.
from it. You were already in
Yeah.
that though, weren't you? Like you say, we went to
I
that
mean, I
event.
had been talking with Rich and I had been doing some work with him a little bit. So I had been, it wasn't my first exposure to it, but it was
Mm,
certainly being in a physical room with multiple people that were in that idea. So it was still, and uh, still hadn't impressed upon me that higher possibility.
mm,
But so since this, a year and a half ago or whenever, and I had this like, psychedelic insight of gatekeepers and, then contemplating it and thinking about doing the podcast, but bringing it through the lens of more clear and grounded thought from normal reality and reflecting on that, your use of the term, I was thinking like, actually, this is really meaningful for me because that is how I really attack life is I look to whenever I want to learn something new or getting to a new industry, like just prior to meeting you, I was getting into performance magic, mentalism, psychological magic. And that's how we ended up connecting. But like, I'm like, who are I never had this, I never had that term, but who are the gatekeepers? Who are the people that are the access points, like the nodes in the network, the most connected and the most knowledgeable? And how can I get as close as I can to them and spend as much time around them and just emulate and emulate their way of thinking and being. And so
Mm.
because that's now realizing like actually seeking out and being in conversation with gatekeepers has always been my orientation as an access point to mastery or to a new industry or to a new world.
Mm.
I was like, this is the right name for the podcast. It's not necessarily about like going beyond reality in the sense of the esoteric. I mean, even though that's an interest of mine, or like, psychedelics is certainly not about that, but it is about like these different phenomenological worlds and accessing them through being in conversation with people who are highly connected into them and very schooled in and have an embodied understanding of those worlds.
Right. I think it also tracks back, though, to what you're talking about there, saying having an interest in esoteric things or spiritual things or whatever.
Yeah,
You know, like you might meet somebody who has an entirely different operating system from you. When I say operating system, I often use that term to mean our kind of like underlying conceptual system, our way of making sense of things.
yeah,
They have a completely different operating system when it comes to how the world works at a fundamental level, at like a real deep level. And that can be so enlightening to connect into somebody who's got I don't want to grade it, but let's say a richer operating system than you have,
sure,
that's able to
yeah,
see more and perhaps see more deeply because of the way they conceptualize. That's incredibly valuable. And that's Robert Keegan's point, because Robert Keegan's a developmental psychologist. He says one of the most powerful things about therapy for people is they get to hang out in a different, he calls it language culture, but I would say they get to
hmm
hang out in a different conceptual system,
hmm
which is they're not going to get hanging out with their regular friends and family. They're just going to get more of what they've
no.
already got.
And the other thing that does, we're going to riff on Keegan quite a bit here right now, is it gets you in over your head.
Hmm.
And that speaks to the rest of the tagline, conversations at the precipice of reality and understanding.
Hmm.
So what I mean by that is, and what the podcast is about and these conversations are about, is like, I'm interested in being in conversations that take me to the edge of the world that I know and understand, and to lean into that. And also with people, I'm interested in being in conversation with people when they're at their edge, when we're both trying to figure out and are at the edges of our two worlds, of our own worlds, and dancing at that edge. It's kind of like the fool, right? Like at the edge of
Yeah.
the cliff. And because being in that space, I think is like, well, I certainly love being in that space. I love the discomfort of that, but I think that's the key to growth. Always seeking that and leaning into that edge.
Hmm. Well, it's only when you're at the edge that you can go beyond.